I'm proud and excited to announce that the new book, Transform Your Body, Transform Your Life, is now available. I've put the links to grab your copy from Amazon worldwide in the show notes, and I can't wait to see what you think. As a thank you for listening to the podcast, email podcast@rntfitness.com with your receipt, and we'll send you the free ebook version to start reading immediately. If you like a sneak peek of what's inside, you can download the first chapter at rntfitness.com/book. Also, you've heard me talking about the power of journaling for a long time, so I'm happy to announce we've now got customized RNT journals in store. There's a mix of prompts and freestyle writing, which you can take a glimpse of on rntfitness.com/journal. Just a quick one before we get into this episode. If you're in the UK and you use supplements, I'd highly recommend checking out Reflex Nutrition, where they're giving up to 40% on all their range if you use the code PTRNT at checkout. I've been using Reflex for nearly a decade, with their microwave being one of my favorite whey proteins. It's grass-fed, hormone-free, and digests so well compared to most on the market. Check out their full supplement range, including all your transformation basics and plant-based alternatives on reflexnutrition.com and use the code PTRNT at checkout for up to 40% off. Suicide is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 45 in the UK. That's a seriously worrying statistic. Mental health in all ages, genders, races and cultures is one of the least spoken about, most taboo subject. The idea of being vulnerable and accepting the need for help is terribly hard for many of us. On this episode, I speak to Neil Shah, founder of the International Wellbeing Insights and Chief De-Stressing Officer of the Stress Management Society. He's a leading international expert on stress management and well-being and the author of a few best-selling books on the topic. And on this podcast, we talk about the 5 core pillars of health, from mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual, and why all 5 are critical. During this, we discuss the taboo around psychedelics, current events, and what life is set to be like in the coming years. This is a candid, no-holds-barred conversation with Neil that I'm excited to share with you. Let's dive in. So you mentioned to me before we got on air something about post-normal. What does that mean?
Straight in at the deep end. So we've been doing a bit of research over the last 4 to 6 weeks, looking at the impact that the circumstances over the last couple of months have had. And there's a lot of people yearning for things to return back to normality. And I'm sorry to break this to you and anyone else that's listening today, ain't happening. We are not about to go back to the way things were before lockdown, before COVID, anytime soon, if ever. There's a very strong possibility that what we're experiencing now is going to be a permanent shift in how we live and work. And really, the thing that we need to take on board very seriously, if we don't adapt, we will become extinct. We only need to look at the dinosaurs for precedence on this. They didn't adapt. Obviously, they weren't able to. They didn't have the technological prowess to be able to adapt. We do, but a lot of people are so stuck with this desire for what we used to have that we're not really looking forward. We're only looking backwards. And I think all of us in any aspect of our lives, we need to really start considering this very carefully. And the thing that obviously you'll resonate with, and it's something I did mention to you in my weekly check-in, is I was fully expecting the gyms to open on the 4th of July. My gym actually sent me an email to say we are expecting to open on the 4th of July. And I'm like getting excited and pumped up, back in the gym, back on track, photo shoot coming up, and it ain't happening. And, you know, we don't know when it's going to happen. So you can sit there and start yearning for all those days. You go to the gym and, catch up with mates, have a really good workout and everything would be awesome. But what if that doesn't happen anytime soon? Or what if even when the gym's open, it's going to be you have to book in 3 days in advance. They've only got half the machines open. That could happen, right? Unless we start thinking about this now, when things don't turn out the way you're expecting, you start to experience stress. It starts to have an impact on your mental and emotional state. And collectively, that's where we're going to really start to struggle unless we start getting ready for it right now, unless we start looking forward at a future we cannot prepare for. Because the reality is there's no historical precedence for this. The closest precedence we've got is Hollywood. And if Hollywood taught us anything, we're all going to turn into zombies and start eating each other's brains. So it's strange and interesting times, my friend. And yes, it's scary, but also for me, is really exciting, because when change is forced, we have to look at the things that we've been ignoring and avoiding for such a long time, for generations. You know, the last couple of months, remote working, how many companies have been so resistant to remote working? Now it has to happen, right? You don't have a choice. How many people have avoided issues around race? Now you can't ignore it. The whole Black Lives Matter, this has brought something that's not a new thing. This is things that we should have been talking about a long time ago, around health. This is one of the most important aspects of a functioning society. But for years, we've not looked at health. All we've looked at treating symptoms. Is someone's ill and we patch them up and get them back on their way, but not address why they got ill in the first place. Now, all of a sudden, if we're going to really, truly navigate this, we really need to start looking at the things that we have avoided, because they're uncomfortable, they're challenging, they're scary, and they're divisive. That's one of the other things that we're finding, that there's so many divisive views. Some people are pandemic, some people are plandemic, some people are white, Black Lives Matter, some people are all lives matter, some people are Brexit, some people are Remain. Now, we've got to get to the point where it stops being all about polarity, but we're actually coming together, yes, bringing different perspectives and different viewpoints, but being able to find a common way forward, because otherwise we're screwed.
You mentioned you've been in quite a lot of research projects over the past 4 weeks, around 4-6 weeks, about these post-normal conditions. Can you just elaborate on this and some of the findings you've had in your clinic and in your lab?
Yeah, so ultimately we've got a team that are basically, they're a program management team that kind of look at research projects, often commissioned by our clients. So we're looking at the impact it's having on a corporate setting, and sometimes they're looking at the impact on society, so they can look at trends, which obviously they can leverage as part of their consumer research. But also, from our charitable side, from our non-profit side, we're looking at the impact to society, so we can better equip people to increase their resilience to the increasing challenges and demands of modern life. And part of that has been through the surveys and the research that we've done through our own data collection, looking at the impact of COVID, working in lockdown, remote working, etc. We've now started to launch something around DIE. It's a process we call DIE, which is diversity, inclusivity, and equality. Then that's not just with reference to race. That's obviously part of it. Gender is another one. Sexuality, neurodiversity, disability. There's such a broad range of things. But one of the things that fascinates me, like for example, we look at representation and how well represented certain aspects of society are across the UK. Now, quote me on these exact numbers. I can share the exact numbers with you at a later stage. But there are more people called Dave and Steve that head up FTSE 100 companies than females and ethnic minorities. So you got more chance ending up at the top of the food chain in a FTSE 100 company by being called Dave a white person called Dave or Steve, than if you're a female or an ethnic minority. So this shows you how underrepresented certain aspects of society are, and how we have still so much work to do when it comes to truly being a diverse, inclusive and equal society. And this is where I think we start to develop certain belief systems about ourselves, right? As people of Asian heritage, right? Like, we have proportionally, in terms of the population, a pretty good representation. When was the last time you remember an Asian descent Premiership football player, or an Asian descent professional boxer, or something like that? And it's not because we don't have the ability, it's not because we don't have enough bodies in the game, because we do. It's just there's beliefs that we have about ourselves that prevent us from being able to step into those roles. And it's not the beliefs we have about ourselves, it's the beliefs people have about us. Now, it's the 21st century. We really need to challenge that. I am very much a result of my cultural conditioning. I was the short, fat kid at school, and that's what I believed about myself. And that's what people told me. Neil, you got many skills in life, athletics and sport and playing football and running long distances and cross country. That's not your thing. Just focus on the things that you're good at. My teachers told me that. I've got report cards that say that. I had to work so hard to overcome those beliefs. And I still struggle with that every day. I have gone on to run many marathons and triathlons and done the Ironman. But every step of the way, I was battling my beliefs about myself. Now, I'm talking this at a micro level. I think we really need to start addressing this at a macro level, the beliefs that we have about ourselves and the beliefs we have about each other and how they limit us in progressing as a civilization.
And how do you propose that? That's the big question, right?
Listen, I'm the guy that posed the question. I ain't got the answer.
Well, not only what do you see as a potential solution, but what would you see as the potential accountability around it?
Well, I think firstly, education is such an important part of this. That's where it really starts. And I'm not just talking about education at school because, forgive me for being blunt. And, I have a huge amount of respect for people that work in the educational sector, but they are essentially working in a system that was developed in Victorian times to churn out people to work in factories.
Yeah.
And it's largely unchanged in the last 200 years. That's why it was developed in that way, to get people to conform. You live by the bell. You do as you're told. You sit down, shut up, and you get on with it. Now, ultimately, we need to get to the point where we have more free thinkers, where people are willing and able to think outside the box. And education isn't just what you learn at school. I'm talking about the images we portray on social media. It's about using people as role models, as powerful role models. We have a lot of very bad role models in the world of what you should look like and what the world should be like. Whereas the reality is that's not the case for a lot of people. When you look at these images and your life doesn't match up to that, that creates incongruence. And for a lot of people, creates distress. And sadly, that has a negative impact on your mental and emotional well-being. And it's something we spoke about the last time we got together is, these images that are perpetuated throughout mainstream media and social media and Hollywood movies, I think I have a lot to answer for. I think we should really be encouraging people to be themselves and to encourage more diversity, not to try and create, replications of what already exists. We need more people that are unique and different, that think outside the box, are willing to truly be themselves, and for us to celebrate that. Not celebrate someone that fits in and you've done really well at fitting into the norm. Is we need more people that are aspiring to be not normal.
I think you mentioned about the education system. For many, it does start there because a lot of the things you discussed, diversity, inclusion, racism, even things like stress management, physical health, everything begins at education when your brain is still very plastic and you're developing a lot of these beliefs and systems. So what can you see? Like, let's say you're speaking to government now. What would you tell them needs to change? Let's say you had the ability to do so. And yes, okay, maybe this podcast doesn't facilitate a change, but it gets people talking. And that's what we need. We need to get that people talking to start with in order to force, the micro needs to force the macro, right?
Absolutely. And to be honest, I operate at both levels. So, directly engaged with people, with companies, with organizations, with community groups. But we also do spend a lot of time working with the establishment. And we have, many sort of relationships throughout the government. We've got a very, very, very powerful advocate, a gentleman called Lord Patel. I'm not sure if you come across Lord Patel of Bradford.
No.
He's basically the guy that's at the Mental Health Commission. When it comes to mental health in the UK, he's the guy that basically has pretty much laid the landscape. And it's for me, it's really endearing and warming for me to know that he's someone from the same heritage as me. He's, an Asian person from East African descent. And, when I met him, it was just like I was meeting, an uncle. And it was great. And he's kind of taken me under his wing. And we've had a lot of opportunities to attend events at the House of Lords. And the reality is, he has been banging this drum for 40 or 50 years. He's been doing as much as he can to get this taken seriously. There is a significant challenge, not just with the government, but with the political structure in general, because they think in 4-year cycles. They're not thinking about what's in the best long-term interests of the country. If you're working, for example, Akash, I know that you're going through a process of, road mapping the future for R&T, what the future looks like. You can't think in 1 or 2 year cycles. Obviously, you're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5 year plans, but you also need to think about the end game. Ultimately, when you achieve success, what does that look like? That could take 10, 15 years, right? Governments don't think in that way. They are only thinking as far ahead as the next election and to ensure that they've done enough to get themselves voted back in. Now, therein lies a huge challenge, because we can never have a truly sustainable long-term plan when we're thinking in 3-4 year chunks. And when we're thinking about what looks good for you rather than what's in the best interest of the NHS, what's in the best interest of the educational establishment, what's in the best interest of the economy. And that really is where, for me, that there's a huge challenge where we can have incremental changes within the existing structure. But when it comes to rooting out in systemic, institutionalized, established things like racism and economic sort of challenges and all these kind of things, unless we literally go back to the drawing board and look at starting again with a better structure, all we're ever going to have is incremental change where it will be a little bit better. You'll have, your children and grandchildren will have it a little bit better than you did. Just like, when my dad came to the UK, he was 16 years old. It was in the 60s, and he'd ring up to get a room, and it would be available. And he'd turn up, and they'd send him away because he was the packy bloke. And do you know what I mean? And where Only Fools and Horses, 7 o'clock BBC, 1981, where they could say, Del Boy could say, I'm off down the packy shop to get some cigarettes. That was normal. Now, in our lifetimes, that has changed. But that's incremental change. It's not to the point where we are all on the level playing field. Equally, the way that we view disabilities, the way that we view gender, the way that we view the LGBTQ community has changed, but it's incremental. Like, how do we get to the point of true parity? Well, we got to bear in mind, there was a structure that very literally was very much built on exploitation. One of the things I've seen a lot of people talking about recently is looting. Like, we're getting really upset that people are, during this whole protest, they're looting shops to get a TV and trainers. Well, go to the British Museum, right? The whole museum is filled with looted merchandise from the Commonwealth. If you've got a system that was built on looting, that was built on exploitation, unless we change the system, all we're going to have is degrees of change. Now, what I'm talking about is creating true wholesale change, and that comes starting from the ground up. We have to kind of start again in a way that serves all of us. And the challenge is that you're fighting the machine, which has been existing for a long time, and right now is doing everything it can to protect itself. So our key role is to empower ourselves with education, know the true history, really know and understand what's going on, and understand that your role as a member of society, like, no one here is devoid of responsibility. If you're complaining about the problems and you're doing nothing, you are part of the problem. And that's really where I think, on all of the subjects that we all talk about, whether it's health, well-being, fitness, finances, how many people are really taught about managing your finances, about investments and things like that? You're not taught about those kind of things. Why is that? Because they don't want you to break the cycle, because if everybody did, then the system collapses. So for me, this is one of the great things an opportunity like this presents, is the veil is very thin at this precise moment in time. And we can see what's beyond. Rather than just waiting for the veil to come back up so you don't have to see the stuff you don't want to look at, as much as it's hard and painful and uncomfortable, I think it's really important we do all look over the veil and see what's there, because that is the only way we can really, truly, freely break ourselves out of this cycle that has kept us enslaved for such a long period of time. One of the things that I've researched over the last few weeks is, how did Asians end up in East Africa? A lot of people don't really fully appreciate this. And, we've known about kind of quite obviously about sort of slavery in the African community taken 400 years over the last 400 years to the Americas to work on the plantations and stuff. Whereas there's a lot of people in India that signed contracts of indentured labor, which is now actually a banned practice under the Universal Human Rights. It's a banned practice where you essentially sign a contract, and basically that means that you are owned by whoever you sign the contract with for a period of time until you've worked off that. So you're a slave under contract. That's how a lot of Asians ended up in South in Africa, East Africa, and South Africa. That practice still continues today in parts of the Middle East, where people are going from India to work on construction sites, from Bangladesh, Nepal. And this is what I'm saying is, like, the system needs that. It's just slavery has just transformed into different guises. Another form of slavery is, for example, the American prison system. You can't have a free person as a slave, but if they're in prison, the 13th Amendment clearly states if you're incarcerated, then they can use you as a slave. So why do you think why do you think that 25% of the global prison population is in America, even though they only have 5% of the population, of the global population? Because it's another way to get slaves. Until we start to really understand and educate ourselves on what's going on, how can we free ourselves from that trap? You know, just coming back to sort of the things that I know that you're passionate about, there is a block and a barrier, and people truly empowering themselves on their health, their fitness, their mental and emotional well-being. Because if all of a sudden we're all fit and healthy, right? We're all exercising, eating well, looking after ourselves. There is a massive, massive global network of corporations that profit every single day by treating the ills that you have that are directly as a result of your poor lifestyle. They feed you crap and then they give you pills to treat the things that you created yourself by the way you live your life. Now, as much as I'm getting passionate about this, and I know this intellectually and theoretically, I know you're smiling because one of the hardest things is applying this to yourself. As much as I know all this stuff, like it's still because we live in a world where there is so many influences around you that are saying, oh, eat me, buy me, do this, don't do that. And you're constantly swimming against the tide, even though intellectually you know better than that, we still have to struggle against this on a daily basis. I would love for us to start educating people to the point where actually going and doing the negative things for your life, smoking, drinking, not exercising, not looking after yourself, that becomes the swimming against the tide. Because right now, doing the right things, you're swimming against the tide. Why is it we can go to the pubs from the 4th of July, we go to restaurants and eat crap food and get drunk and, go to the cinema and all these kind of things, but you can't go to the gym? You know why? Because in all these places, they have a card reader and it creates money. Whereas the gym, you paid your membership, there's no additional or significant additional revenue stream. So it's just like, okay, we're going to stop doing that, but we're not going to allow that. Because for me, it doesn't make sense. And I've heard the science, but the science doesn't stack up as well. If you've got gyms that have distance and created equipment, spacing, and so on and so forth, it's as if not safer than being in a restaurant where you can sit a meter apart from someone, where people might be laughing and joking and whatever. It could be safer than a pub. It's definitely safer than a cinema. So, this is what I'm saying. It's like, until we start getting to the point we don't just blindly believe everything we're told, whether that's by mainstream media, whether that's by social media, whether that's by common gossip, whether that's by political forces, where we really start to understand ourselves what's right and wrong. And I think this is where the work that you do is really important, because there is so much information out there and it's hard to know what to believe. And really, when you're able to show someone, don't believe anything other than yourself, you give people a process where they can find their own truth, because it's only true if it's true for you. And at the start of my journey with you, I did question things because I'm like, forgive me for saying this, there's a part of me that I know better. I've been doing this for years, I've trained, I've done this, that, and I know better. And I'm always working against that particular challenge of feeling that I know better. And when you can get to a point where you're able to not trust you, like I followed your guidance, I had to learn to trust myself. That was the big reveal for me. But how many of us don't trust ourselves? We don't listen to what we know is right and wrong, what we know works for us. And blind faith is one of the most dangerous things. The biggest challenge we face on this planet, people blindly following and believing things without questioning it. Whether that, and again, not causing offense to anyone that's listening today, but whether that be religion or politics or news or mainstream media, don't believe things because someone told you. Believe it because it's true for you.
Neil, you're obviously extremely passionate about this topic.
You asked the question. What can I say?
Yeah, which is great, and I love it. And there's so many things I could bounce off that with. But the one question I want to ask, because you speak to a lot of these major organizations and establishments, what's the mood there? Like, what are they thinking? What are they saying behind the scenes when you speak to them?
For the most part, the overriding sense that we're getting from a lot of people is fear. Or fear of the unknown, fear of not knowing what's going to happen, fear of the outcomes, fear of, the uncertainty, the volatility, the complexity, the ambiguity that this scenario has presented for all of us. So that acronym, I can't take credit for it, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, was actually originally coined by the American military post the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the collapse of the Soviet Union created a bit of a power vacuum, which they described as a period of VUCA. What they described in the 90s is nothing compared to what we're experiencing right now. So you've got a lot of business leaders, large and small, that are like, whoa, like what the hell? How do we start to prepare and navigate this when we just have no idea what's going to happen or how things are going to play out? On the other side, there are a few organizations that are proper licking their lips and rubbing their hands together. And there are a couple of industries that I think have profited immensely out of this. Because they were just, whether it be fortuitous or whether it be just something they were able to capitalize on. And Amazon, a great example of a company that have just skyrocketed in terms of sort of profit margins over the last couple of months because they have a commodity that everybody wants. The supermarket chains, many of them have done relatively well out of this. Companies making things like fitness products and a lot of these online trading platforms are doing relatively well. But the vast majority of us, if you're in hospitality, you run a restaurant, you run a small business, and I'm sure this is something you're facing as well, that even though you could still support and, kind of work with your clients to drive forward their programs, the natural reaction is, well, the gyms are closed, I can't train. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that kind of go into that place of like, whoa, I'm going to stop and pull back. And that for me is the overriding sensation I'm getting for a lot of people. Stop. Let's just pull back. Now, this is not the time to stop and pull back. This is the time to commit to the things that are going to best equip you to navigate your journey forward. If you are, in a canoe coming down a fast-moving river, raging rapids, right? And it gets, close to a waterfall, you don't sit there and stop. You don't just pull up your paddles and think, oh yeah, I'll just wait to see what happens. At that point, you got to paddle harder. You got to really dig that paddle in as deep as possible and use every ounce of strength to make sure that you're able to get over that hurdle and that challenge. And it scares me that a lot of people, there is a biological reason for this. I'll come to that in a second, but there's a lot of people that are just like, oh, stop. So, as you know, my area of expertise, so-called area of expertise, I don't know how much of an expert I am, but I've been doing this work for 20 years, so I know a thing or two. If nothing else, I'm an observer, and I've witnessed a lot of people, probably now, going into the tens of thousands of people. So I kind of got a good sense of the human experience. And the biological response to stress, as you know, is the fight or flight state, right? So nature gave us this response. Saber-tooth tiger pounces out in front of you. Your body changes the way it functions. It produces certain hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Heart starts pounding. Breathing comes shallow and fast. Blood pressure, blood sugar increases. Muscles tense up. Feeling angry and hostile. You're basically getting ready to either beat the hell out of that saber-tooth tiger or turn and leg it as quickly as you can. So nature equipped you with a response to do that to the very best of your ability, right? Perfectly valid, primitive, instinctive response given to us by nature as a survival mechanism. We need stress. Stress is not a problem. It's actually a very positive response. If it wasn't for stress, we wouldn't be sat here today having this conversation because our species would quite literally be extinct. Stress is a response that allowed early humans to not only survive the threats and challenges we first faced when we surfaced on the plains of East Africa, it allowed us to go and thrive and become the dominant species that we are today. The challenge isn't that we get stressed. The challenge is in modern life, people are sat in front of their computer writing an email or a report and they're starting to feel the stress levels increasing. Or they're sat there at 10 o'clock at night looking at a spreadsheet thinking, how am I going to balance the bloody numbers to make the budget work for next month? And that was me last night, by the way. Or we're sitting there thinking about how do we navigate these challenges? And it's not an immediate, direct, visceral threat to your very life, to your very mortality. Now, nature, when you get stressed, higher brain function shuts down. The frontal lobes that are responsible for creative thought, problem solving, lateral thinking, all these kind of creative, logical processes, they shut down because we're not getting oxygenated blood to the frontal lobes. So they're going to the arms, legs, hands, or feet because that's what you need to fight or run, right? So your brain is literally operating on survival mode. It's on basic functioning. So it can make quick snap decisions like, do I run, do I fight, do I punch, do I block, do I kick? So, you might feel like smashing your computer to bits and running out of the house or out of the office, but that might not be the most appropriate response. So then you get to a point where you can't think, you can't focus, and a lot of people experience something that looks like this.
For the listeners, what exactly were you doing there?
Frozen. So just for those that are listening and not watching, I was literally just frozen into inaction. I was on my internet freezing. That's me being shut down with the brain, the computer of the brain goes blue screen, right? And non-operational. And I'm sure we've all experienced that at some point in the last couple of months. Actually, I'm sure you've experienced that, where you just get to the point, it's like, what the F in hell? And you can't think. You can't see the wood for the trees. You're like a rabbit in the headlights. And that, for me, is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing, is we go into a state that serves a purpose, but it's completely counterproductive to the challenges that we're facing that need a mental and emotional response, that need us to think laterally, to think to problem solve, to think creatively. And that really is where we really, really need to be looking at how we manage our well-being from a mental, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual perspective. So that's, for me, what I would say the 5 building blocks of well-being, right? So the mental is obviously it's what you think, right? So it's the story in your head, the story that's running, what you say to yourself, the kind of the internal dialogue. Emotional state is how you feel. Is how you are feeling about the world around you and your place in it, your interaction with others from an emotional place. Physical, obviously, I don't need to tell you, that's your area of expertise. It's the functioning of your body. Now, all of these are connected. They're all spokes of the wheel or blocks of the building. So maintaining your body in an optimal state. Now, obviously, my focus is on the health side. For me, fitness is a component of health, but you cannot have you could be fit and unhealthy, but equally you could be healthy but not necessarily have big muscles and a six-pack. For me, the health is the optimal thing. The fitness is important, but the health is paramount. Social is looking at the collective. We are cells of an organism. We are one human cell of a broader human species organism. We cannot truly look at health on an individual basis. It doesn't work. Because the challenge is that there's a disparity and incongruence. So for me, I would always be looking at the social. And one of the things I found really powerful about the RNT family, the RNT community, is that you fostered that we rise together. We're here to support each other. We've got each other's back. Now, what if we could scale that up across broader, bigger communities, across cities, across counties, across countries, across the globe? That's where you suddenly start getting to the point where you're living in a world that Star Trek envisioned, where we've come together as a species and we're, really starting to expand technologically. We've eradicated poverty and health issues and so on and so forth. So this is really where the social element, I think for us to be able to rise beyond our current paradigm, it's really important that we start looking at the collective. The global collective. And the last one, and this is one where some people do kind of roll their eyes in their head and react a little bit, which is the spiritual. Because the moment I mention the term spirituality, people automatically assume I'm talking about religion. Now, again, I don't mean to cause offense to anybody that's listening today or challenge anyone's religious beliefs, but in my humble opinion, which may be worth nothing, might be worth something, religion is anti-spiritual. It's taking away from the true essence of spirituality. In my belief, true spirituality is the connection to something bigger and greater than ourselves. But that connection comes through yourself. You cannot find this connection floating around outside of yourself. The only place to seek out that connection is within, right? It's that, like, I think there's a couple of religions that say that we are manifestations of God, or God lives within, or the gateway to heaven is within the soul. There's all of these kind of phrases that are offered through many sort of established religions. But then they tell you, read this book, go to this building, worship in this way. And rather than you trusting yourself and following your own intuition, they're basically taking you away from that and diminishing your intuition and telling you what to do. That really is where if we're really truly going to start breaking out of this, we need to look at our own spiritual well-being. Because for me, that's one thing that a lot of people really struggle with, that they have very poor spiritual well-being. They don't really have a true belief and connection in something far bigger and greater than themselves. And when I say that, I'm talking something universal. It's not just for you because you're of this faith or this religion, or you're this color skin, or you go to this building or read this book. True spirituality is universal and is applicable to everything and everyone in the known universe. Again, I need to understand things through science, and science has given us answers to this, which sadly a lot of people ignore. Have you come across the God particle?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so there are many, many different experiments that have taken place over the last 30 or 40 years. You've probably heard of a scientific facility in Switzerland, CERN, where they've got the Large Hadron Collider, where they're doing all these crazy experiments. I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole, but basically, cut a long story short, there is an element called the 0-point field. Have you ever heard of the 0-point field?
No.
So, if I do this, I have disturbed a wave of energy that will quite literally continue throughout the universe.
So what did you just do? You just moved your hand, yeah?
I've moved my hand, right? I have created a ripple in this, what's known as 0-point field, which is a field of energy, and that ripple will continue throughout the known universe. So let me explain, and it's important to connect back to what we're talking about, because we all feel disconnected, we feel isolated. I'm Neil, you're Akash, I'm human, this is a table. It's bullshit. Science has taught us it's bullshit. Everything is all part of a matrix of energy, right? We are all connected. So, this essence that, you're white, I'm black, you're Hindu, I'm Muslim, like, it's nonsense, because science has proven that everything is intricately connected. There is basically what used to be considered the vacuum in space, or in between the cells in your body, that was considered to be a vacuum. In between the atoms of this table, it was considered to be a vacuum. The science has showed us that that's not true. There's a field of energy which is known as the 0-point field. This is now we're going into the field of quantum science, and I'm not an expert in these things. I've just read a lot and looked at a few things. So again, there are people that are listening today that will probably have a lot more knowledge on this, but I'm just kind of giving you the footnotes, if you like, just the essence of it. But there's a reason I'm sharing this with you. So this field of energy exists in everything in the known universe. Now, if God was this almighty, all-powerful force, this spirit of energy that can exist throughout the whole universe, could that not be described as the same thing? If it occupies everything we know and we've ever known, then if there was a manifestation of God, it would be the 0-point field. Now, also, if everything is connected, that means we aren't separate. We are just different cells of the same organism. We are the same, all of us, everything. And this isn't just to humans, this is to animals, to the land beneath us, to the trees, to the earth, to the water, to the other planets in the solar system, to the other galaxies, to the other to everything. We're all connected. And this whole myth of duality, of separation, is, I think, where a lot of the stress comes from. So for me, when we start to explore our philosophical beliefs, our spirituality, and when we start to see science and spirituality are starting to converge, and where science is able to offer us answers to spiritual questions, we really need to start paying attention to that. But what I find fascinating, even when the science is unequivocal, like climate change, great example, where 97.3% of scientists, and that was 10,371, don't quote me the exact number, is about 10,300 scientists were polled, and 97% of them agreed that climate change, human contribution to climate change is real and something we need to pay serious attention to. But people still say, but it's a debate. No, I don't believe it. It's like, wait, there's no debate. There's no confusion around this. And it's the same with some of the stuff that I'm talking about. Even when there is no confusion, even when it's clear, people will still argue against it, because what you're doing is you're shaking their belief system. And we're really, truly trying to hold desperately on to the things we believe, because that's what defines us. It's scary to let go of those beliefs. And I come back to myself, and this is what you've been working with me for the last, since September last year. It's shaking my own beliefs about myself, and they're so deeply ingrained and so enrooted. And I do this for a living, my friend. Even though I do this for a living, it's really hard for me to shake my own beliefs about myself and the world around me.
So Neil, what are you doing? What have you done yourself, or what do you recommend with people you know and your clients to shake these beliefs, but also to find that intersection between spirituality and science, and potentially going into areas that they might be scared of or fearful of, or into that unknown bliss, if that makes sense?
To peak flow state.
Yeah, you could say.
Yeah, I know you read the book that I recommended to you, and I think you've given me a nice segue. The book, for anyone that's interested, a book called Stealing Fire.
Yeah, very interesting book.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There are some things in there that require some thought, and you might not necessarily completely subscribe to, but there's a lot in there that is very powerful and does really get you to think about things in a different way. What we tend to do, both as individuals and as a society, is, and it just comes back to sort of how the brain works. When you have an experience, something happens, you have some kind of a challenge in your life or whatever, your brain will find a way to make sense of that experience. So if you imagine you're on a ski slope, and it's a bluebird powder day. So it's snowed all night. Yeah, and I know you haven't skied yet. We'll get you on the slope sometime.
Oh, I've skied 3 times.
Oh, you have? Okay, cool. Yeah. Sorry, I got that
when I was a kid.
Sorry.
It's been a while.
That was it. You haven't been for a while, so we need to get you back on the slopes. But you've got one of those incredible days that the slope's been freshly groomed, no tracks laid down, right? You're the first one down. You are literally laying down fresh tracks. And the second person gets off the lift. The path of least resistance for that person, there's a track that's already laid. It will be easier for them to go down that track. And as the day progresses and we get to the afternoon, more and more people will start going down those tracks. And you basically created then moguls. And for everyone, it's easier just to go down that track because it's already laid. And also, when you try and go around that track or go around the side or the other side, it's hard because there's bloody moguls and bumps in the way. So you just go down the preset track. That is how the brain works. The first time you have an experience, the first time something happens, it creates a pathway, right? A neural pathway, which is basically like laying down fresh track. And then over time, you just continue processing information down that same neural pathway. That's how a behavior is formed. That's how a habit develops. After a while, it's so deeply ingrained that it can take a hell of a lot of hard work to reset that. Unless you then engage in, some kind of alternative therapy, and there's things like NLP and hypnotherapy, and these things are great and they can help. But if those tracks are very deeply embedded, even when you try and relay new tracks or form new tracks, you may still fall back and revert to type. The whole phrase "revert to type" is because you reverted back to the original pathway. There are some modalities that I have explored and discovered over time. I just want to check there's no boundaries and to the parameters of our conversation today.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. And the first pathway for me was a program called Vipassana. It's a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And it was a very good friend of mine, Harry. We used to run together, and he was talking about it. He went on one, and he ended up getting kicked out after the third day. He got kicked out of a Buddhist meditation retreat, so it was hilarious. And then we were just like, look, no, he went back and did it again, and I was like, I'm going to do this as well. And it was after in 2012, my marriage broke down. I was, we'd been together for 11 years. I was going for a bit of a tough patch, and I was like, I really need to do this. So I booked onto this program. And you basically sit on a mat for 10 days from 4:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, watching your breath, like pretty much watching your breath. And then it progresses, and then you just do a body scan. But that's it. There's no kind of chanting. There's no spiritual or religious element to it. It's just silent observation. It's true mindfulness. So, first couple of days, I'm like hating it. I can only think about, basically, I became an animal. I could only think about food and sex. That was it. I was thinking about everything I wanted to eat, everything I'd ever eaten, everything I was going to eat when I finished. I thought about every person I'd ever had sex with, every person I thought about having sex with. I was just like literally an animal. And, you just go back to primitive basics. It was hilarious. But hilarious now. At the time, it's horrible because it's like I'm sitting there thinking I'm going to be like Buddha under a tree getting enlightened, and I'm like an animal. And it's just like, I'm not enjoying this. And then I get to like day 4, day 5, and I suddenly start to get these moments of stillness and peace, just fleeting, like milliseconds. And then it kind of went from there. Day 6, day 7, something really bizarre happened. And I think it was like the afternoon of day 7, and I'm like having a lot of pain in my body and, sitting for extended periods of time. It's uncomfortable. My back's aching, my knees aching. And all of a sudden I start to feel these really incredible lucid moments. And then just like that, like I've got this light show coming on, right? And I'm hearing these sounds like angelic harps. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? Bro, seriously, I thought I was tripping. I properly thought someone had slipped something in the tea. I was having a proper psychedelic experience. And I was like a bit freaked out. It was lovely, but I was like, what the effing hell's going on here? Anyway, then that kind of continued. It was like in and out of that for a couple of days, and I came out, and literally I came out of that, and it changed my life. I was just, driving back, crying my eyes out, and just feeling everything so powerfully. And I very much always need to understand how things work. I was the kid that took the television to bits when I was a kid because I wanted to know where the pictures came from. So when I have an experience like that, I need to know why. Well, what happened? So I started doing some research. And there's a substance. It's known as an endogenous substance. What I mean by that, endogenous means that it's a naturally occurring in the brain. It's a substance called DMT. DMT basically could also, could be described as the spirit molecule because it occurs in the brain at the 2 most powerful spiritual experiences a human being will ever have. And what do you think, Akash, in your lifetime, in any human being's lifetime, what are the 2 most powerful spiritual experiences a human being will ever have?
Rebirth and death?
Totally. Depending on your belief systems, you're coming out of spirit into body, and you're leaving body going into back to spirit, right? So those arguably be the 2 most spiritual experiences that you'd have. In both of those experiences, your brain produces huge amounts of DMT. Your literally brain is flooded with this substance, right? So when a human being comes into being, when you're going through the process of birth, you're having a powerful, trippy spiritual experience. At the point of death, you're also having a powerful, trippy experience. But this is why people have what's known as the near-death experiences, when they describe, I'm seeing lights and I'm talking to angels and God came. And it's for real, because their brain is being flooded with this substance. Now, the first experience I had of a conscious, lucid DMT dump was in my first Vipassana experience. When I started reading this, it's like, DMT, okay, I've heard of this before. I started doing more reading. I ended up coming across this TED Talk by a guy called Graham Hancock. Graham Hancock basically is responsible for the most watched TED Talk in history, but it's also banned. It's banned because he was talking about ingesting DMT as a form of spiritual communion using a substance known as ayahuasca, which happens to be something that the South American shamans have been using for thousands of years, for many hundreds of generations. I started doing some research on this, and pretty much every culture on the planet has historical use of DMT substances. In Britain, the Druids would have used mushrooms, psilocybin, right, as a way of communing with their spirits. In Asia and the Middle East, it's another psychedelic known as acacia. So anyone read the Bible in RE, Moses, when he was off the mountain talking to God, there's the reference to the burning bush. Burning bush is a reference to acacia. Moses was tripping. Now, I'm not saying this in a derogatory fashion, but he was able to access a non-ordinary state of conscience by creating this kind of this landscape through ingesting DMT. Now, there are many different ways to be able to create this experience. You could do that by spending a lot of time sat on a mat, in complete isolation, introspection, or you could take it, in a spiritual setting by ingesting it. I'm not for a second advocating this, by the way, but we have been engaged with a number of organizations like Imperial College that have a psychedelic research unit, and the benefits of being able to use this, coming back to our original point, as a way of being able to treat mental health challenges, but not just people that are broken, by the way. So a mental health challenge could be someone that's been clinically depressed and the system's failed them and they've tried all kinds of medication, nothing's brought any kind of relief. So it could help someone that's broken and we need to get them to be functional again. But if you're functional, it's not like other medication where, if you're not ill, you take the medicine, it does nothing. This can make you greater than. Does that make sense? Because what it's doing is working like the peace basher. It's coming down the slope and flattening it. So you don't have those preset pathways to process information. So you're not going down the same habits and behaviors. You're able to look at things with a fresh perspective and literally start again by rebooting and reloading a new program. And that's where, for me, this is one of the most powerful tools that we have available to us, but it's also the tool that was taken away from us. This is not new. This has been in circulation in use for thousands of years. Then modern structures of governance, modern established religions came into play and got rid of all of the paganistic and animistic religions that really had a connection with nature and with the land and with the plants that really showed us how to integrate and interact with our physical surroundings in a way that we are working, more symbiotically. This is why the Native Americans and the South American cultures, the Aboriginal cultures, the many sort of the African tribal cultures, the Asian, the sadhus that sit up in the mountains and they sit there with their ganja. So, they're all using some kind of way. And I'm not suggesting we turn to substances. I'm just saying, is there things that we can learn from their practices that have been forgotten? In the same way we discovered mindfulness, meditation, yoga, things that were lost for a long time, that we started to rediscover them. Are there other things that we've forgotten that we can start to reclaim so we're not just stuck in this insanity of going round and round, doing things that don't work, and things are only getting worse?
Why are these substances banned or looked down upon or frowned upon? It's such a taboo subject to talk about psychedelics.
Totally. I totally. From a professional perspective, the amount of times I've been speaking at professional conferences and people will shoot me down for even willing to broach the subject. Because
I've done research on it in I think there's a lot of labs in America. I think you mentioned Imperial College. There's a lot of labs in America that link psilocybin for anxiety, depression, and there's like one or two hits of it, and people are feeling heaps better after trying so many other things. And there's multiple labs and a lot of research coming out now to support the use of it. So I'm fascinated as why it's been tabooed so badly.
Well, let's just talk about. I'll come to the taboo in a second. When you're saying, when we're looking at things like antidepressants, which are, depending on which study you look at, are between 17 and 23% effective, right, at symptom relief. But they might relieve the symptoms of the anxiety, depression, mental health condition, but they create a whole host of other challenges. So people then get hooked on a kind of a cocktail of drugs, and half of the drugs are balancing up the effects of the first drugs, if that makes sense. And it's a cycle that basically becomes a lifetime addiction. There was a gentleman called Dr. Professor Nutt, David Nutt, and he did a study. He was actually commissioned by the government, the previous government, about 10 or 11 years ago now, to look at, and all of this information is available publicly. It's all peer-reviewed, referenced. This is stuff that I'd encourage you all to look at. In fact, can I just say for the record, please don't believe anything I say. It's not because I don't know what I'm talking about. I want you to validate and fact check this for yourselves. I'm not the kind of person that's here to share stories and conjecture and fake news. I want you to check this and validate this for yourself. So he was asked to run a research study to look at the most dangerous drugs in circulation in British society. I believe it was 2011. Okay, so what do you think the most dangerous drug in circulation is in Britain today? Now, let me just give you some context before you answer that question. A class 1 or a schedule 1 drug is classified as something that has zero therapeutic value, highly toxic, and has a significant chance of harm to self or others, right? So that would be the classification of a class 1 or a schedule 1 drug. What do you think is the most dangerous drug in circulation? For every 100,000 people that use this substance, that will have the highest proportion of harm to self and others,
alcohol?
highly toxic. Sorry?
Alcohol?
Totally. Now, this is fascinating because the most dangerous drug in circulation you can buy in any corner shop in any supermarket, freely available. If I created alcohol today, and it was not known by humanity up until this point, based on the current classifications, alcohol will be a Schedule 1 drug. Right? On the flip side, look, if you look at something like heroin, for example, heroin has therapeutic application, right? It is toxic, it has high chance of harm to self and others, but has therapeutic value. So according to that, it has a lower classification than alcohol should have. Right, so this is fascinating. So that was significantly, by a country mile, the most dangerous drug. At the other end of the spectrum, what do you think is the kind of things that are classified as Schedule 1 drugs that have very low chance of harm to self and others, aren't toxic, are not addictive, and have significant therapeutic value?
You're talking about Class A, right? LSD?
Yeah, or mushrooms. Mushrooms are still, psilocybin is a class 1 substance.
Okay.
Even though, number one, it's non-addictive. And I'll tell you why it's non-addictive, because if you eat them every day, after a few days, your body would develop tolerance, they stop working. So you just be eating them and get no benefit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you can't overdose on them. They've got significant therapeutic value where there is studies upon studies and there's meta-analysis of those studies to show how powerful they are. And I gave you the statistical antidepressant. The Imperial study, I think the first pilot study had about an 83% success rate. I'm talking about one treatment, one night. 6 months later, 83% of these people were still symptom-free. I'm not talking about every day, once. No ongoing treatments, no ongoing medication.
I think I read the same study.
You're done. You're out of it.
Yeah, I read the same study about a year ago.
And there are many studies that have replicated that to the point where I think it's like 6 or 7 states in America have already gone to legalization. And then you've got things like, obviously, the cannabis, which I know the laws changed on November the 1st. I'm not talking about sitting there smoking a joint. I'm talking about, is a tincture or is a CBD oil, for therapeutic application. Again, this was withheld from us. Things like the CBD, the cannabis products, the psilocybin products, they're withheld from us, not because they are dangerous, not because they're not good for us, but because of cultural bias. It comes down to cultural bias, our belief system. And that's where at the outset of our conversation, we talked about challenging our belief systems. Rather than just believing it because that's what you're told, we really need to look at the data and look at the research. And if we're looking at the research, then we have to start questioning our current behaviors. Because if we believe the research, we would ban alcohol today.
Is there also something to be said for, I think you spoke about this earlier, in that too many people would lose money?
Totally. It's hard to synthesize and license and regulate something that you can go into a forest and pick. Do you know what I mean? And that for me is something that's really troubling. If you can, that's what they're actually doing with the psilocybin. You've got pharma companies that are now trying to synthesize and put it into little tablets, which takes it away from its core essence. And that's kind of scary for me. What I'd rather prefer is that we've got guidance and regulation, and we've got information available on how to do this in a safe way, how to do this in a way that's going to bring you benefit, rather than just going out, you might pick the wrong mushrooms, you might do it in an unsafe way, these kind of things. Again, please, for the record, I'm not for a second suggesting anyone rushes out to do these things. What I'm talking about here is very controlled, safe applications of these things in a therapeutic setting. The point I'm making is not for people to rush out to do these things. The point I'm making is to challenge what we believe. Just because something is legal doesn't mean it's safe and good for you. Just because something is illegal doesn't mean it's bad for you and dangerous. Remember, there was a time where slavery was legal. That doesn't mean it was good. That doesn't mean it was appropriate. You know, we need to really start to challenge things. We need to really employ critical thinking in all aspects of life. Because how do we start moving forward if we, you know, as Albert Einstein said, the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And that's what we've been doing. We're wondering why things are getting worse. We're wondering why the main cause of death for a man in Britain today, a man under the age of 45 in Britain today, is suicide. It's because we keep doing the same things and things are getting worse, but no one's paying the blindest a bit of attention.
The stat you just mentioned around men and mental health brings me on to a question I wanted to ask you is, what do you think the long-term mental health impact is going to be from what we've seen so far in lockdown and pandemic? You know, someone who runs an organization called stress.org, I'm sure you've got your finger on the pulse with this question and thinking about it very deeply.
I'm very troubled. I've got to be honest with you. I'm troubled, and I don't want this to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, but we're so busy focused on the facts, you know, the R number and the infection rate and lockdown and this, that, and the other. We're missing out on, for me, what is potentially going to have a more severe impact to society, which is mental health has already been a problem for quite a long time. It's something that we're very late to the party. We're very slow at getting to the point where we're willing to talk about this. It's only the last couple of years we've got better at really openly talking about this in society. And it's still got a huge taboo around it, right? We've allowed this to get to the point where it's the main cause of death for a man under the age of 45 in Western Europe. It's the second main cause of death for a 15 to 29-year-old on planet Earth. A lot of people don't know that. If you're under the age of 29, the second main cause of death is suicide. When it's got that bad and we still are not putting this as top of the agenda, we should be taking this as seriously as COVID, if not more seriously. But what's happening is we've got a series of events that are going to even more significantly impact people's mental and emotional well-being. Because the direct impact of coronavirus is that we're all worried about our health. We're seeing people dying. We're hearing all this stuff in the news, social media. That's creating anxiety. The outlets people had to make them feel better, to distract them, to to allow them to lift their spirits, whether that be, for me, going to the gym, going to restaurants, socializing, going to the bar, cinema, all of the structures we had to escape from the drudgery of life. You're also now stuck in your house. You don't even have the escape of going to the office. There were periods we weren't even allowed out of the house for, more than a little bit of time. You couldn't even go and see a friend. For me, the most devastating thing is we've taken away basic human contact. We need oxytocin release. Like, how many people have not had a hug in 3 months? Like, that for me is devastating. Like, we need physical contact as a species. We literally need it. Small children, premature babies that don't get enough physical contact experience what's known as failure to thrive syndrome. Again, I didn't make this up. You can Google this. And it can be fatal in children, in small babies. And how many of us, it might not be fatal to us, but it will have an impact on our mental, emotional, and our physical state if we just don't have enough physical contact with our loved ones. This really scares me because it may take a couple of months for us to really see the true impact of this. And yes, okay, things have started to open up a little bit, but I think there's a lot of people that have already found themselves deeply impacted by this. And we also have to bear in mind the ones that are going to be most impacted by this are the ones that are least likely to be impacted by the virus itself. Who are the ones that are most likely impacted by the virus are people that are generally tend to be older, have got underlying health conditions. The people that are most risk for the mental health issues, as we talked about earlier with some of the statistics, are the younger people. So your life might not be at risk, but your mental and emotional well-being is seriously at risk. So part of this is we really need to start opening up positive dialogues around this now, quickly. We need to make it okay to not be okay. We need to really ask better questions of each other. Every week I send you a check-in, right? Or, if I speak to you or whatever. The first thing how do we open up a sentence? How do we open up a dialogue, whether that be verbal or written? What's the first thing you say? Yeah, how are you? That's the most bullshit question in existence. And let me explain why. Not because there isn't value in that, because 99% of the time when someone asks you, how are you, right? Firstly, the person asking it doesn't really want to know how you are. They're just asking it as a societal norm, just because it's, what we do. And also the person answering that question is not really telling you how they're doing. Like if I say to you, how are you? Because we've known each other for a while and we, have an ongoing dialogue, you might actually tell me how you're doing. But, just a random person you bump into in the gym, or you're just, just interacting with someone that you're not speaking to regularly, and they ask you how you are. How would you answer that question?
Yeah, I'm good,
I'm
thanks.
good, thanks. I'm fine. Can't complain. Not bad. If you ask me that question, I'd say I'm wonderful. But whatever answer came out, it's a lie. Even if I say I'm wonderful, that's my preset default response. I train myself to say I'm wonderful because I'm Neil Shah from the Stress Management Society. I need to be wonderful. Even when I feel like shit, I'm going to say I'm wonderful. I want us to really, really make better inquiries of each other. And when I ask you, how are you, to be really genuinely interested in how you are. And when you answer that question, you'd be willing to be vulnerable. And part of this is getting away from that kind of the machismo we see in modern society, where we just need to put a face on it. Yeah, everything's fine, can't complain. Pull your socks up and get on with it. It's all good. And actually be willing to be vulnerable. Yeah, sorry.
For the people that struggle with vulnerability, that struggle with asking for help, what do you say to them? Because it's easy saying what you're saying, but another question is like people asking for help is another whole different ballgame. And in most cases, I think there was a recent, you probably heard about this, the recent Bollywood actor who committed suicide. And, on the surface of it, everything's great. But it turns out he just had no one to speak to, really, for a lot of it. So what advice can you give here? Because that I think is one of the hardest things.
I'm shaking my head and burying my head in my hands because I do this for a living. I understand this. I find it really hard to ask for help. I find it really hard to open up because I'm expected to be the one that's got it together and telling everybody else how to deal with things. In fact, when we first started working together, I think for the first couple of months, half the time I was lying because I didn't want you to think, oh yeah, you know what Neil's all about, what he stands for, and I wanted you to not see me in any different way than you expected me to see me. Does that make sense? It took me a while to get to a point where I was comfortable enough to say, do you know what, I've really effed this up, and I'm really not feeling great, and I'm really struggling with this. And I do this for a living. I've been doing this for almost 2 decades, and I still find it really hard to be vulnerable because I'm worried about what people will think of me and what they'll say and what impact that will have on my reputation and so on and so forth. Whereas, the reality is, just because you're a mechanic, it doesn't mean your car doesn't break down. Just because you're a doctor, it doesn't mean you don't get ill.
Yeah.
And, and I think as much as I understand that, logically, I still every day need to remind myself that it's okay. Like just because I know what I'm talking about, it doesn't mean that I don't have those days. It doesn't mean that I don't struggle with this journey myself. It doesn't mean I don't need to be held accountable. And it doesn't mean that I don't need support. And in fact...
It's funny you say that. No, go on.
I was going to say, in fact, because of what I do, I should be the first one willing to hold my hand up. And yeah, it's been hard. And actually, working with you, having you as my coach has been a real journey of exploration for me of getting more comfortable with that, to be honest.
I was going to say that I have a similar sort of thing going on because like you run a stress company, I run a fitness company, and it's the same sort of expectation, but on a different part of the health paradigm that you mentioned earlier. And someone said earlier, I was speaking to someone about a week ago, and I was saying, recently I've been struggling with snacking in the evening. And his response was, really, you? I can't imagine you snacking in the evening. And I was like, is that really the image that, like there's like no snacking allowed for Akash? And I felt exactly how you felt there. And it's like, okay, maybe, is that right for me? Should I be saying that? Yeah, but just being honest. And because we are just human as it is, it's just, we all struggle with the same things every other human struggle with.
I think there's tremendous power and beauty in authenticity. And we see a lot of people that set themselves up as the gurus. I'm the guru, right? I'm the, and no disrespect if you know any of the names I'm about to mention of people that you follow, like I'm a Tony Robbins, I'm a this, I'm a Joe Wicks, I'm a whatever. I'm like, great, wonderful, right? You know, that's their marketing strategy. That's how they set themselves up. I see myself as a little bit different. I don't like to, you know, I'm not a guru and I will literally shoot anyone down that attaches that label to me. I'm a witness. What I have done is I've had the opportunity for the last 2 decades to observe, and, you know, I can say this confidently, literally millions of people through the programs, the research projects, the companies we work with. You know, we're talking now getting into millions. The data we have is extending over a hell of a lot of people. I've seen enough and witnessed enough to have a really good idea of what I'm talking about. I'm not saying I've got it right, but I can aggregate that information and come up with a pretty good conclusion. In the same way, you know, like I know your story. You were destined to be a lawyer. You know, it's not like, you know, you set out from the age of 8 and, you know, had this life plan to set up a fitness company. You kind of came into this, but through your journey and the amount of lives you transform, the amount of people you work with, through the community and the family you have, the research you've done, you know, all the kind of, you know, the wonderful trainers that you've got working within your team, you can aggregate that, and you again are a witness. Now, again, you may be happy with the label guru, and some people may attach that to you. But I think one of the reasons I've come to respect you is because you've got a body of evidence based on your own work. Through the people you've worked with, you know what works based on, you know, a process, a methodology. I have a huge amount of respect and value for that, rather than do what I say because I'm right. And even when I'm wrong, I'm still right. Because that's what I'm seeing a lot, where people get so stuck in their own head and they're drinking their own Kool-Aid that they can't actually see that they've actually kind of moved away from being in a place of authenticity. And yeah, I'm going to share something with you, which it's not something I ever shared until about 18 months ago, for the same reasons we're talking about. I didn't start this journey of setting up the stress management site, which is our charitable arm, and then going on to set up International Wellbeing Insights, which is our research and consultancy arm, because of professional expertise. I didn't set it up because I saw a business opportunity. I started this journey because, cut a long story short, I set up my first business when I was 24, turned it into a multi-million-pound business. If you've seen the film Wolf of Wall Street, that basically happened to me. Living fast, you know, in all aspects of it. I'm talking like fast life, fast drugs, fast alcohol, you know, like all aspects of it. And I crashed and burned. When you're on a path that doesn't take you to your destiny, the universe comes along and gives you a baseball bat around the head. And I had a very powerful course correction. And I did have a breakdown. And at the depths of that experience, and even though this happened in 2003, this part of the experience I only shared for the first time about 18 months ago. Well, actually about 2 years ago now. And as the depths of that experience, I attempted to end my own life. I tried to commit suicide. And that was the lowest point in my life. Thankfully, I failed. But that actually became a seminal moment for me. And that was the point where I reevaluated everything, and I started to realize why I was here. And I had this moment of realization, which for me was my first real spiritual epiphany, where I realized that whole experience was a gift. Up until that point, I thought it was a horrible, nasty, painful experience. And I realized, no, this is a gift. This is the greatest gift that the universe could ever have given me. And I realized that I was going to use my own experience to be able to help and support and empower other people that are going through similar challenges. And bear in mind, that was 2003. The world has got significantly more challenging since then. And that's really why I kind of started this journey. And throughout this whole process, I've had to keep myself grounded in the fact that I'm not the expert. I've been there. I've done it. I've got the T-shirt. I know what it's like to be on the receiving end, and I had to find a way to go through my own journey until today, 17, 18 years after the fact. My first most important client, my first most important customer, my first most important patient is Neil Shah. In the same way, your primary customer, as long as R&T is around, is going to be Akash Vagela. And the moment you lose sight of that, then you stop being authentic. I don't know if that resonates with you. I don't know if you agree with that, because not everybody sees it that way.
Comes back to taking care of yourself first, making yourself the priority, and putting on the oxygen mask first, as they always say. It's hard. It's hard to do that sometimes, especially when you're in a service-based industry where you have one of those light bulb moments that you had yourself, and you have one of those life-changing moments, and you want everyone else you want to give that experience to other people. And in that giving, you forget to give to yourself.
Yeah. But I think there's an important point there. I don't want to give them my experience. No. I want to help to facilitate their own experience, because that was my experience. And that's why I said at the outset, don't believe anything I say. It's only true if it's true for you. Our job, our subject matter is connected but a little bit different, but we're both basically doing the same thing. We're really helping people to identify their truth. We're really helping to connect with their authenticity, right? And underneath the story we have developed about ourselves is where our true selves lie, where our sovereign cosmic power lies. And our job is really to strip away the stories to connect people with their ultimate truth. And that for me, when I offer that term sovereign cosmic power, people think it's a bit woo-woo and left field and it sounds a bit hippie. But what I'm talking about is the truth of who we actually are before the stories start getting overlaid on that. And then you start believing those bloody stories. And those stories have a lot to answer for. And really, one of the things that I'm really starting to take away from the time we've been working together is the stripping away of those stories. And there's still stories that remain there. There's still some food-related stories, which you ask me about every couple of days, and I'm working on that. On other aspects, I've really got better at stripping away some of those stories and making real progress. But some of those stories are so deeply ingrained, they're so powerful, that they require a lot of time, effort, and energy to really get to the root. And that's really what I'm talking about, is when we start to get to those core wounds. Where they really started, and where we can then really start building ourselves up again in a way that's meaningful.
One of the things we talk about is being in the shape of your life for life. And that for life bit is so critical, because for me, there's three things that you have to change, and it's your mindset, your behavior, and your identity. And those three things are so hard for people, because it's exactly tackling those deep-rooted issues. Now, if we just take your example from a high-level overview, you mentioned nutrition. Now, there's some deep-rooted issues around nutrition. If you want to get into the shape of your life, you will have to tackle your nutrition to a point, right? But if you want to get into the shape of your life for life, if you want to stay there, you're going to have to really uncover that muck there and really undo the tracks. And that's the hard work that people don't want to do, because it's easier to jump to another plan rather than actually understanding yourself. And like you said at the beginning, asking of the truth of yourself.
And I'm more than happy to be honest about this, because I kind of got to a point where, I started this process with you, 92 kilos, totally out of shape, had broken my back, had been struggling. And then, first couple of months, I was doing okay, it was, not quite right, but made a bit of progress, plateaued a little bit, got to about 83, 84 kilos, plateaued a little bit, wasn't making much progress. In January, new year, new start, really kicked beat. And then I started to notice gains, right? And then I got to this second level where, I got to about 81 kilos, in good shape. Everyone's like, Neil, you look great. I'm feeling good, starting to feel more defined. I'm feeling a lot stronger. But again, second plateau. Now, at this point, I've got my nutrition a hell of a lot better. I've got a routine. But then there's the next level to that, right? Because with every story, it's like layers of an onion.
Yeah.
There's something beneath that. Yeah. And I think I struggled to got through that first layer, now the second layer, now the second junction. And it's like, and I've been here for a couple of weeks now, and I'm training hard, and I'm eating the plan mostly. But there's things I know that need looking at, things that need tweaking. And it's every time you get to a next level of that story, you find that layer, that door is shut even more firmly. The first one, it didn't take that long, a little bit of effort, a little bit of WD-40, and we got it open, right? We cracked it. This second door is like, it doesn't want to open. And I'm like, shit, this story's deep. this one's going to take a bit more work. I might need a crowbar. Forget the WD-40. I'm going to need to really put some work into this. And I have been. And, it's not like I'm not willing to, but I think this is where we all need to be willing to be authentic, to be vulnerable, to put your hand up and ask for help and support. And it goes back to, when we talked about the 5 building blocks, social, no human being is an island. We cannot do this by ourselves. And unless we're willing to lean on the people around us, to lean on our friends, our family, our community, our tribe, then you're always going to find you get to a point where it's just too much. We can't handle it in an isolated fashion. And I think this is where obviously that's been a real revelation for me. And also when I get to those points where the door is firmly jammed shut, yes, it could be, I need help, I need support, I need accountability, but sometimes even being wanted to shy away from that, because if I do put my hand up, then I can't hide from this anymore. Does that make sense?
Fear of accountability is one of the biggest problems we see. We see it so often because it's exactly those stories are suddenly uncovered, and it's like, holy crap, I don't want to deal with that. I'd rather just stay away from that door. I can stay the level I'm at. I'm happy not to explore that one because I don't know what's going to come out the other side.
Do you know, I was listening to Kevin Hart on Joe Rogan. I don't know if you listen to that podcast.
I haven't seen that one, no.
And everybody thinks of him as the goofy, silly, short fella that's always a bit of a clown in the movies that he plays in. He's obviously a stand-up comic as well. But he's actually a really, really, really cool guy. In terms of the podcast I've watched, his was by far one of the more inspirational ones. And there's many different stories he shares, but the one thing that really resonated with me is life is like a game. It's like a video game. And you get to the end of every level and you got to fight the bad guy or overcome the challenge, and you think that's it, and you celebrate for a couple of seconds, but then you got to go again. And then it's the next level, and it scales up and builds and builds and builds. And, that the game of life, as they say, the video game of life is never ending. And just, it's what we were talking about with the layers of the onion. Just when you think that you've got it, you've nailed it, you've cracked it, you realize actually all you've done is complete a level. And I think that continues throughout our lifetimes. Dare I say, throughout many lifetimes, that you go, even when you finish this lifetime and you're done, you've been, yay, I'm dead, I've finished. And you've got to come back and do it all over again. If that's what your belief system is, I don't know. But and I think when we get used to that whatever we achieve or wherever we get to, it's just one level. And then you realize that there's so much more beyond the end of that level.
Mm.
And no matter how great shape you get into or how much business success you accomplish, or, I remember speaking to you after you published your first book, that, great, it's done. You enjoyed that for a moment, and then it's like, well, next book. Do you know what I mean? It's like you got to keep going. You got to keep pushing, because if you don't, life pushes back, and if you get complacent, that's when you lose. So we got to be ready. That you enjoy those moments, celebrate those moments where we do achieve and we do make it, but then just get ready for the next level, because that's what it's about. Everything we accomplish on this level is only preparing us for the next one.
Do you think that can go two ways? In that, I'm completely in agreement with you, but do you think it can go the other way, where you just feel like nothing's ever enough?
Well, it's not what you do; it's the intention you do it with, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that we're doing it to attain stuff. We're not. And I guess this is the difference whether we're doing it from ego or we're doing it from a deeper place. If it's because I want to look good, it's what other people say, or accolades or awards, or the amount of people that are talking about you, or the amount of likes I've got on Facebook or whatever else, that stuff is BS. That stuff will get forgotten in 5 minutes. But if we're doing it because all you're doing is you're starting to realize your true potential. All you're doing is removing the barrier between you and your own destiny. That's authentic.
Yeah,
it's not about what external validation.
Self-mastery in its finest.
Absolutely. And when we are able to let go of the attachment of the end goal, but just to focus on the moment we're in right now and making the very, very best of it. Eckhart Tolle, one of the most powerful things I learned from listening to one of his seminars is for me, I would spend so much time preparing to go on stage. I'd be like, I'm going on stage. There's like thousands of people in the audience. My whole preparation in the 2 to 3 days before standing on stage was that moment. Right? And then I'm on stage, so the moment has arrived, and this is what I prepared for. This is what it's all about. It's bollocks. And I tell you why. It means everything that I did up until then for me was a complete waste of time. It was just to prepare for that moment. He says, as you're walking on the stage to the place that you're going to speak from, the lectern and the sea, that is as, if not even more powerful than the moment you actually open your mouth. The getting out of the taxi and walking into the building, the getting dressed in the morning, having a shave, having a shower. Every single moment is the most important moment of your life. And when you live that way, that is true mindfulness. That's true mastery. Because every single thing that you do, every single experience, every single moment is the most powerful gift. And that's where we get to the point of true gratitude. And that's where, nothing is static. The universe is ever changing, right? We are ever changing. So you can never get to a point and think, okay, that's it. I'm just going to be static now, because it doesn't work, right? The universe around you is still moving. So unless you keep moving, there's going to be a problem. So how do we ensure that we keep moving, but also appreciating and enjoying every moment, not with the destination in mind, but enjoying the very act of movement? Whether that's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or social movement, that we are continuing to grow and evolve, expand the comfort zone, all those cliches, you know what I'm saying. Being static is probably the biggest challenge that we face in our society today, where we get stuck in the way things are and the yearning for the way things are or the way things used to be, rather than what we said at the outset, preparing for the future, whatever that looks like.
Amazing, and completely agree. How can people find out more about Neil Shah and the man behind these wise words?
So many, many different ways. You look me up on Amazon. I have a few books in circulation. You'll find a couple of books I've written around stress and well-being. I've written some books around mindset, a book called Turning Negatives into Positive. I've written a couple of books on NLP. I don't claim to be an NLP expert. It's just one of the tools that I have in the bag. I have written a best-selling book on the subject, but that's just because it's a tool that I use amongst many others. You can find me on Facebook. If you're RNT fam, I'm in the community, so you can find me very easily on Facebook. Our websites, the work we do from a corporate perspective is wellbeing.work. So if you're interested in some of the research and consultancy work we do, www.wellbeing.work. And our non-profit charitable side is www.stress.org.uk. I'm on Twitter as Neil Karma. Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. You put my name into Google, you'll find me pretty easily.
Awesome.
But yeah, at the end of the day, for me, the biggest desire I have for people that listen to this conversation, if it's piqued your interest, if there's something that you sparked a bit of interest for you, go off and do some research, educate yourself, empower yourself. Power literally means the ability to do or act. The person with the greatest power has the greatest ability to do or act. The reason I respect you so much is you empower people. You give them the ability to do or act, to change and transform their lives. We need more people that are not sitting there holding the power. I'm going to tell you what to do, but you have to come back to me and buy more and consume more. So in that relationship, I always have the power. We should be empowering people and freely giving away these tools, because if we all rise up, then that's the holy grail. That's what we should be working towards, a society and a community where we rise on each other's shoulders, not squashing people down to get ahead in life.
Very well said. Thanks so much for coming on, Neil.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Listen, big love to you, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here today on this episode of RNT Fitness Radio. I'd love for you to do a quick little favor for us. Please head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating, leave a comment, and share it with your family and friends. If you're interested in learning more about how to transform your body and positively change your life, go to www.rntfitness.com and explore all our free content on offer. Thank you.